We're going to practice a little bit, all right? Can you guys do this? You too. Hey, take your hands out of your pocket, buddy. Come on. He's just wandering around. His other buddy has 2 bags. He has an excuse. You really didn't have an excuse. Could you help? All right. Ma'am, thank you. All right. The other thing is when I say something and I go, that means it was funny, so let's just practice laughing. All right, good. We're Facebook Live in this. Believe it or not, they gave this stage over to Grease and Gears Garage. All of us are just buddies that build motorcycles for a living. We're in the industry, and they gave us a stage to invite folks to just hang out with us in our garage, basically, and have our friends show us one particular thing that they do at their shop. And so that's Grease and Gears Garage. We keep the language relatively clean, so you don't have to use earmuffs or anything. Occasionally we slip up. If we do, just don't write that down or tell anybody because they get mad. We've already gotten paperwork once this tour. But we're in all 7 cities. One of the cool things that we're doing, which is why we've got multiple things happening here too. It's just like if you walked into one of our garages. So today we got Kyle Shorey. Kyle is a cowboy. When he's not out rustling his cattle or his rabbits, he is building motorcycles. Goats, rustling goats. But Kyle is from Texas, Roanoke, Texas, just outside of Fort Worth. And he's a fantastic motorcycle builder with Shade Tree Fabrications. He's going to be shaping a rear fender for us today from scratch. So he's gonna get the steel hot and pour it into. No, he's not. He's gonna beat it with hammers on a sandbag. Right now he's working on the shrinker stretcher. He's trying to figure out what his excuse is going to be for not being able to shrink metal with a hammer. I don't know how he's going to do that.
That fucker don't work.
But anyway, we'll figure it out when he gets done. Right here, what we've got is a bike that the Grease and Gears Garage stage consists of Mark. He also played Gimli in Lord of the Rings. He loves it when I say that. There's an ongoing bet now with folks that are traveling with the tour how long it's going to take before he throat punches me for that joke. But it's funny, and I like it, and I know it's funny because you laughed. So that's Gimli. And then we got Chris Cowan. Chris, wave to the people. Chris is the founder, owner, editor, Cycle Source Magazine. So if you guys have ever seen Cycle Source Magazine, he does a great job with that. The only truly grassroots magazine in the motorcycle industry. So, Chris, say hello to the nice people.
Hi, nice people.
Some of them haven't decided if they want to stay for the whole thing because they're standing up.
Everybody's standing up to keep warm, right? 7 degrees this morning. I went outside and almost died.
Yeah. I sent him outside to the truck this morning to get my shave kit. I was like, hey, man, if you don't mind, I left my shave kit out there. He said, where is it? Between the seats. And he said, not a problem. He comes back in. My toothpaste was frozen. I don't know how you got. I mean, it's cold in Des Moines, but it's not Minneapolis cold down there. It's cold up here.
Listen, there's 2 things I'm sure of after. This is many times. Good friend of mine, Kevin Bass, is an instructor of chopper class up here, and we've been hanging out with Kevin for years, so I'm not a stranger to this area. But 2 things I know from sure from knowing people from Minnesota is that it's no wonder why you guys have so many cool motorcycles, because I'd be damned if I'd walk outside during at least 3 of these winter months.
Well, it's 9. I think up here it's 9. 9 months it snows. 2 months it thaws. For a month they ride like crazy, and then they put them back in. That's why Gilby from up here builds all that crazy stuff. He's got time on his hands.
But I was also introduced to ice drinking up here. A lot of people call it ice fishing.
It's called melted. That's water.
Let's be serious. There's not really fishing that goes on those little sheds. There's just a whole bunch of drinking and some lying.
And some lying. That's ice drinking? Because otherwise that's just drinking. Water.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ice when it melts.
You pull a little thing they call a bob house out onto a lake. You drill a hole.
This one in there.
You put your fishing line in there, and then you drink beer.
I like it. I know my old lady wants to do that, and that's not happening. And I told her I'll introduce her to somebody that'll take her ice fishing. I don't fish, and I don't sit on the ice on purpose. Oh, look how
So I said 2 things. The other thing that I'm sure of it, that there's not probably another stronger, more resilient people than that you find in Minnesota.
A.
People up here love life, love what they do. It's a pleasure to come here all the time. So thank you guys for having us up here and hanging out with us in the garage today.
So that's Chris Callan, ladies and gentlemen, and he and Mark and I mess around with this bike right here, and it's called War Pony. And I might have Chris explain a little bit more about what War Pony is later in this segment. But basically what we're doing with that, we started in Long Beach. We've got 7 Progressive International Motorcycle shows, and we are building that bike from scratch. It's a Paco frame, a GSXR front end. We've had to make a steering stem for it to make that fit, ride right wheel. So we're putting that together. That's Chris's personal bike. His 2003 Ultra Classic was not unfortunately loaned to a friend. Unfortunately, while on loan to a friend, got totaled. The friend is fine. The bike, not so much. All that's really left is the drivetrain out of it. But it was a built drivetrain. Already had a Baker 6-speed. So we've got zippers right now that's kind of going through the motor, freshening it up. It had 250,000 miles on it, freshening that up, and that'll be War Pony. And that bike will ride off the stage at the last show. We'll fire and ride off the stage. So we're building it from scratch. So you can keep up with that on Facebook Live. And if that thing fails to fire and ride, then you can get on there and actually make comments and be like, you guys are a joke. I've had somebody already on here call, who was I on stage with? I was on stage with Nick Bollier, who last year won the Hot Bike Invitational. And he also won the JMP Cycles Ultimate Custom Bike Show nationally. So he won the Hot Bike Tour for that magazine. And then he won this and won 10 grand doing this last year, 2 different bikes. And they got on there and called us rookies about something we were doing. So it's always fun to read the comments. In Long Beach, I don't know where this comes from. One guy said, hey, your host needs to be on Slim Fast. They took a shot at my weight. I'm not fat. My body just makes me look fat. I mean, it kind of did, or that one kind of wounded. I'll probably be thinner at the next show. No, I'm not. What am I talking? They called me Fatrick when I was growing up, so there's not a chance in hell I'm going to be any thinner anytime soon. And it's not my belly that hurts when I bend over. It's my back because my belly is fat. So, yeah, hey, what are you laughing about there, buddy? I see you walking out. This is one of our nice truck drivers laughing at me for being fat. I see. He's not fat either. He's just about 4 feet too short.
This is the thing about Grease and Gears Garage, though, man. What we're up here doing, some of the guys are way more professional than some of the others. Some of the stuff you'll see us struggle through because life is not perfect. Everybody doesn't know everything. Sometimes you figure out stuff as you go. And kind of what we're doing up here is just showing people, like, this is how easy it is to do this stuff. You get involved. You get a couple guys to hang out. Some of them know what they're doing. Some of them don't. They'll teach each other. You know, pretty soon you're figuring your way through what tools you need. You start stepping up your shop. You get a little bit better as you go. But that's all it takes. All it takes is the drive and the determination to make your motorcycle into a one-of-a-kind bike, and you do it a piece at a time.
Chris and I have been in the motorcycle industry literally our entire lives. There was not a moment when we weren't doing it.
So in other words, we've made absolutely no money.
Zero money.
Zero.
Lots of friends, more enemies, zero money. But we learn something every time we get up here from these guys. All right, Kyle, before you make that noise.
Uh-oh.
Tell us what you got right now.
It's a very vague statement as far as a living.
A living,
but,
yeah. I make a better living than Kyle because you can see I eat more. Just kidding. He's just better looking at me.
Yeah, well.
All right, tell us what you got here.
So basically, you know, I'm sure you all have watched TV shows where everybody's shaping metal and doing this stuff. It's not as hard as, you know, everybody thinks, I don't think. I didn't have a ton of schooling in this. I just kind of started doing stuff. I've truthfully never made a scratch fender before. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it on stage in front of y'all. I thought that'd be cool, right? Entertaining slightly. I mean, I've made gas tanks. I've made everything else, but there's just never been a call for me to make a fender. Truthfully, an 18-gauge fender isn't a fender I'd ever use on a motorcycle because they're too thin. Because there's so much vibration in Harleys and stuff like that. It's just
it'll
not
rip.
something.
When you bolt it up, it'll eventually the bolt will
There's so much reinforcement that needs to be done, but
for purposes of our show.
For purposes of our show.
And that's the only piece of metal we had.
And this is what they give me to work with, so and I'm not about to try and hammer out a heavy-duty fender on this little thing. So I don't have a big bunch of tools in my shop. I have a small plenishing hammer, an English wheel, a bunch of these.
And just to let you know, this is a plenishing hammer. That's where eventually, and he'll go over this more, that's a plenishing hammer. The English wheel back here, I'm sure you've seen. If you're a motorcycle enthusiast, you know who Jesse James is. What a nice guy. It was never said about him. But anyway, but you'll see those guys work. And I know he's not watching this on Facebook Live, so I can pretty much say whatever I want.
He's not listening.
He's not listening. All right, so you cut out a piece of metal that was the basic shape that you knew you wanted for your fender.
Yeah, I mean, it's easier to cut the curves and stuff before you start, obviously. Just trying to cut around a concave bend is going to be tougher with the shear. So I'm going to go ahead and just get this curved out, start hammering out with mallets. Generally, I use Snap Fab wooden mallets, but we didn't get those in time, so we're going to use these.
I forgot to bring my Snap
I
Fab
also
wooden
have
mallets.
a super cool Snap Fab hammer stand, and you guys should go on and check out snapfab.com and weldtables.com because they make this super awesome jig table. And
These tables, go ahead.
The hammer stand he makes is set up, and, man, I do everything on it. I do body work on it because you can walk all the way around your piece. I do all my shaping. He sells bags also that are round. Just anything you're working on. It's such a neat little table because it's got holders for all your every hammer you got, every anvil you got, and then
and what's cool about Joe Melky's stuff from Snap Fab is that the way he got into it is he wanted to make some hammers for himself, and he was in Mitchell, South Dakota, and there's a company there that makes gun stocks. So it's the laminated wood, but it's like industrially laminated. I mean, I'm not a woodworker. For some reason, my wife thinks I'm a carpenter, so she thinks I should be able to make stuff out of wood. No. But anyway, he went and got that gun stock material, that extra stuff they were throwing away, and he started making these beautiful mallets out of it.
Yeah, they're purple and just all different colors.
And people wanted them, so now he's sold those all over the world. But his dad then got in on the action and now makes beautiful round leather sandbags. And so snapfab.com. But that's a great cottage industry.
And weld tables.
And weld tables. These are great because they're going to send them to you like an erector set. They're tabbed.
I put this table together in like 45 minutes. It came on a flat pallet, not put together with any of the bracing or anything, and including this. These even all slide together. The bottom sections all slide together. It's all laser cut. It's really awesome. And then you can buy like all the stuff.
The jigs, it's got all these little holes in it, and you can bolt stuff to it to hold it and jig it and that kind of stuff.
But
would you come up here?
That guy. You. The guy that made all the sheet metal on his thing out of one piece.
Yeah, I want
Maybe we should just let him do this.
No.
Now I'm really going to.
What's your name? Mark. Where's that microphone?
Yeah.
While Kyle's cutting, I want Mark to explain.
Yeah, I'm going to
go ahead and get to work, Kyle. I'm tired of watching you stand there.
Thank God for Kyle, for God's sake, do something.
God's sake. I want to see him mess up this fender. What's your name? Mark. You were talking to that because that thing
Good
here.
morning, everybody. My name is Mark Eklund.
Mark Eklund, and he has got a beautiful motorcycle here. It's up front by the kind of by the front entrance.
If you go up by the front, it's got Be the Match on it. It's the sport bike version right when you walk in, the second bike.
It's a Scout, Indian Scout, that he's made into basically a sport bike. It's got a fairing and a cafe rear end on it and stuff. But the reason I wanted you to come up here, A, it works out that we're doing a metal shaping thing, and he made like way too many pieces for that bike before he was satisfied, I heard during the builder meeting this morning.
What I did is, if you look at the bodywork on that, the bodywork is all 60 thousandths aluminum. So what I did, I knew a lot of people that'll make the bodywork and then weld all that stuff together. But what I ended up doing is I wanted to do it a little bit different. So what I did is it all started out as single sheets of aluminum. So if you look, it's a sport bike. So it's got a full front fairing, full front fender that's all contoured. And the rear section is all contoured also. So it's sport bike fairings out of aluminum. But what I did is it's all single sheets of aluminum, so it's all hand hammered and English wheel. So what I did is instead of using, the planishing hammer, I never really got on with that. So it was all hand hammered and then English wheeled. So if you look at the rear fender, the rear tail section part, it's all contoured, but it took 12 attempts to do that. I bought 4x8 sheets of aluminum and went through 12 versions of that, 2 for the front fender and 2 for the front fairing. The rear section of that started out as a wood buck, and what I did is I hammered over the top of that, and I had to stretch it kind of like saran wrap, because if it starts bending or creasing, you can't use it anymore. So what I would do is I would hammer it, stretch it, hammer, and pull it over the top like that. The front fender and the front fairing, that was, all I did is I took a mocked up fairing from a Honda RC51 sport bike and copied that out of cardboard, wrapped it around and did it that way. And then that stuff, there was no molds. I just hammered that into shape and then finished it from there.
One of the big things I wanted to invite him up here for is because the name of the bike is Be the Match. And at first I was thinking, my brain goes, because I'm a motorcycle nerd, I'm thinking Matchless. Somehow he tried to copy an old Matchless, and I was like, okay, maybe I'm getting that vibe, but that doesn't make any sense because you did it at an Indian Scout. So tell them why it's called Be the Match.
What happened in 2012, we've been on Be the Match. Be the Match is for the Stem Cell and Bone Marrow Transplant Foundation. They're actually about 1.5 miles from here, so they're real local. And what happened, and we went on, my wife and I, 10, 12 years ago, we went on the Be the Match. You can sign up to do Be the Match, which what they'll do is they'll take a swab out of your tongue or out of your mouth, and then they put you on a registration for that to see if you can match your stem cells or bone marrow to somebody that has cancer. So we did that a long time ago, and in 2012, I got called up for a Be the Match match. And I did a stem cell transplant with somebody in Pennsylvania. We met them about a year later, and then we've been in contact ever since. And then I thought it would be a really neat idea to do something to help promote Be the Match. So the Be the Match kind of thing is more for younger people to be involved in, because they're usually a better match for people. And what I did is I figured it was a sport bike kind of thing to bring more younger people into looking at bikes. And the Indian Scout just came out that year. I like the idea of the liquid-cooled Scout idea, so what I did is I bought a Scout, pulled it apart, used the gas tank and engine, and then started building everything else. It took 2 years to do the entire bike, but I thought it would be cool to have something with Be the Match logos on it to help promote it, and that was the whole purpose of the bike, is just to get it out there so people are interested. We had some information out there about Be the Match. And the first time it was run in public was we had a 5K run at the Be the Match headquarters, or right there, to lead off the little kids race to watch that. And we have a video of that. It's kind of neat to see that. So
that's why I wanted to do it. Ladies and gentlemen, give them a big hand now. That's what motorcycling to me is about, reaching out and helping people be in a community. So thank you so much.
One plug about this whole place is this is the first time we've been in the motorcycle show itself, the red carpet part. If you look at the people around here that are actually the builders of the bike and you talk to them, it's amazing how friendly and how knowledgeable a lot of these people are. I've never met any of them before. Everybody comes up and talks to you about it. And one thing, if you're into motorcycles and want to try building it, everybody in your city probably builds a motorcycle somewhere. If you just go in and talk to people about this stuff, people are going to help you out and ask questions as much as you want to people, because people want to share building this kind of stuff.
Sure. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thanks. You're welcome to hang out with us up here if you want to watch him screw this up. Yeah, do this, Fender. And so watch and hang out. But anyway, go to BeTheMatch.com. Go to BeTheMatch.com. Facebook Live. Doesn't cost you anything. BeTheMatch.com. BeTheMatch.com. You might be the key to saving somebody's life. It might be right there in your body and you don't even know it. BeTheMatch.com. Thanks for your word about that.
So, as usual on Grease and Gear stage, we're having technical difficulties with the shrinker stretcher. Last weekend, they made me make a set of pipes without a welder. That was awesome. But I guess they think I'm considerably talented, which is a huge mistake.
You're going to use these now?
We're going to talk about these. Basically, these are shaped like this for a reason. Obviously, bigger curves are going to give you a bigger curve in your wider curves in your concave curve. But the pointier it gets, that's for shrinking. So when you're going along your edges, that's what's going to pull this fender around on both sides and give you a tighter radius here and a wider radius in the center, and that's what's going to make your fender start turning into a concave curve. Generally, with that shrinker, I can do the middle, and then I can pull the sides together, and that's what those do. It's got teeth, and when you stick it in there, and when you press down on it, it actually shrinks the metal together, and will pull that around. Again, the first time I do this.
But you can do it with a hammer.
But you can do it with a hammer. It's a little more labor-intensive, but we're going to shoot for doing that. Plenishing hammer. You're going to get a lot of dents with this, and you can do it with just this and an English wheel, but it's a lot of hits, and you got to have big arms, and I obviously don't got those.
You ever want to make a
so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my middle and start getting my concave curve, and then I'm going to come across these edges and get this little curve in, and that should suck this fender around and start making it look actually like a fender.
Wow.
And I'm just going to use probably that tire to mock it up on to kind of start getting my curve. The more difficult thing is going to be with that type of setup, you can shrink in proper increments on each side. With this, you're just trying to do it with that little point. So it's going to be a little tougher to get this fender to twist and get an exact curve. So really, I'm just making excuses right now if it don't turn out right.
Well, and the way you can tell, obviously these tools look very similar, and a lot of people, did I bore you? He turned around real slow. That guy went.
Like, no, this ain't it.
I had never heard anybody call me that with their eyes before that I noticed. If you ever want to know how you can tell the difference between these two, it's written on the end. One says shrinker, one says stretcher. It's very technical. It really does.
I had to tell him that.
He had to tell me that. Kyle's my mentor. Kyle and I both have bikes here this weekend in the freestyle class. And Kyle came up, was telling me, he said, well, I think I got some competition here. And he was telling me about his competition, the one bike he was really worried about, and it wasn't mine. That's a friend. That's a friend. It reminds me why I haven't put a bike in a show in 15 years.
You better keep talking. This is going to take a minute.
Go grab that microphone. I'll talk to you. Man, I'm glad we didn't go drinking last night. This is not. When I was in college, my dad is I can't tell because I don't have an accent. I'm from the South. My dad was a country preacher, and so when I went to college, I had all those Judeo-Christian, ethics. And when I would get really hammered on a Saturday night, my punishment, because you have to have punishment because that's the way God works. I later figured out that wasn't how God works, but anyway, that's what my dad had told me. Thanks, Dad. It was I would make myself go to chapel the next morning at 9 o'clock in the morning. If you're not into that, take up metal shape and you get hammered, your punishment is standing near a bag while that's happening. That is brutal. I do a lot of English wheel work in the mornings if I have a headache. Tell him what he's doing. No, you said you didn't have a sandbag.
Yeah.
What did you use?
What I did, everybody uses the sandbags like this, but I never had one that I made that worked out decent. So what I ended up doing is my sandbag instead was I had a Napa floor dry. And at our shop, we had a bunch of those, just the bags, just like kitty litter. And all my hammering was done into one of those. But what it does is it kind of gives the same amount of movement as one of those does. But the kitty litter would move, and you'd kind of break it down, and then I would.
How did you keep from ripping the bag?
I went through a bunch of them.
Oh, okay. Hey, honey, can you bring the broom?
When you watch him do this, you see some of the people do this on TV, and they do this, and then, 20 minutes later, it's a fender. It takes a long time to actually
It does take a long
stuff.
time. And they're just
But you
giving
can
me an
see,
hour.
hold that up now.
Yeah, it gets
you
in
can
shape
see
pretty
with just
quickly.
that little bit of time, he's taking that flat piece of metal, and all of a sudden it's taking some shape.
Yep.
But we're not shrinking.
We're not shrinking. Have any of you guys ever done metal shaping? Any metal shapers out there? Oh, you have? What have you made before?
Take it out of the way.
Can you say that? Hey, just why don't you walk up here? Or hey, I just hired you're getting paid just like us, buddy. Don't worry about it. Go ahead and say that in the microphone.
I've shaped fender. I do body work for a living.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
I do the big rigs now.
That's not so. But do you paint?
Yep.
Okay. You know, I've got a lot of buddies, and I'll say, oh, you do body work? No, I'm a painter. You got a lot of guys that are like, no, I'll paint, but don't get me near body work. So most of my friends just look at me and say, don't get near my body work.
No, I'm combo.
Oh, yeah. So you do it all, huh? All right. On big rigs. That's nice, man. That's nice. My son is a diesel mechanic down there in Des Moines, and he's talking about wanting to build a big rig drag truck now. So I told him he needs to get out of my house before he gets me excited about that and takes all my money. That's metal shaping is one of those things, though, that if you have ever thought about doing it, you can get into it relatively inexpensively. I think if you go to snapfab.com, Joe actually sells these bags. I could be lying to you right now, but it's not on purpose. I do lie on purpose all the time, but typically it's only to my wife and other women. Sometimes my friends if I owe them money, but I try not to borrow money. But anyway, it's I think the leather bag that his dad makes is like $50, and you just fill it with regular sand, or you can fill it with shot, like if you refill your own shells, you can fill it with shot. And I think the hammer set, you can get 3 hammers from Joe for like $175, less than $250, and a piece of metal from Tractor Supply, and you can be shaping something. And I always tell people, I don't know, you guys might have a different kind of scenario, but I always tell people just try to make a bowl, like a chip bowl. Just try to make a bowl, right?
What idea was this?
He can't hear anymore, so he can't hear you right now.
Yeah, I'm going to
But the other thing, too, is you don't even have to have all the body hammer stuff right now. I mean, you can go and get either cheap body hammers, or you can, if just to play with it, just get some sheet metal, aluminum. You can use a normal ball peen hammer or anything just to start.
Hey, come back later. I'll be more interesting. I'll be funny later. I'm funny later in the day. This side's getting weak if you guys want to come over and sit down. Right now, if this were a ship, we'd enjoy the rest of your show. My dad was a preacher. I mean, he used to call people out all the time. I was an acolyte. Do you guys know what an acolyte is? Where you light the candles? When I was growing up, I think I was in like 7th grade, and he was at a church, and the pulpit was way up in the air, that stage, and then there was a pit where the organ was, but to get down to the communion table was like 5 feet. I mean, it would have been like, yeah, I've been down there. And we had these really straight-up chairs that my dad and I had to sit in. He made me sit up there the whole time. And I fell asleep and rolled right down to the communion table. But my dad would call people out for leaving the sanctuary in the middle of worship. He'd be, where are you going? Real country preacher. That planishing hammer that he's using now that's real loud is he's made a lot of very severe dents in that metal. That planishing hammer is going to smooth some of those out now, and you'll see that it'll start raising it. The exact same thing that he could be doing with a hammer with smaller taps, that's just much quicker. Go ahead. If you don't have a planishing hammer, but you would like not to have to talk to your spouse, significant other, get one.
So what that does, that basically instead of standing there all day hammering like 20 million times, that smooths it out. It's basically doing the hammering. It's got the bottom one will have a little bit of arc to it. The top one will be flat. So what it does is it replaces the hammering to help smooth it out a little bit faster than if you do it by hand.
I am fat.
So then you just go back and forth and to this to get more shape to it, and then smooth it out with that.
That planishing hammer too, you can get different. The top piece is a die. You can get different shaped dies for those, and it'll come with probably 4 or 5. But you can get different shaped dies as well to work that.
His arm is getting tired right now.
My arm's really getting tired now.
I warned you last night. We're sharing a space to sleep in. The other thing, you can only do two things with metal. Aaron Green told us this. You can stretch it, you can shrink it. The only two things. Now, everybody out there just said, that's a lie. You can cut it, you can weld it, you can bend it. Whenever you do anything with metal, you're either shrinking it or stretching it. And so when you're doing that on a piece, you're either making it thicker or you're making it thinner. You know, you're either bunching it up or you're spreading it out. And so you're going to want to be very consistent with that. It's basically a pattern that you're going to use in order to make that happen. Hey, Kyle, they're so close over there, I can tell. Chris actually whispered in my ear earlier. He said I could have had this done a long time ago, but it's funny to watch Kyle beat with that hammer. If you need him to take over, give you a break.
Let me hammer again.
I'm not. I worked my whole life not to be a mechanic. It sounds bad, but I was like, I'm clumsy, so I'm bleed every day, and it's hard.
Remember when I said I'd never do this?
Come on, buddy. Come on. Go, Kyle. Go, Kyle. Go, Kyle. Go. All right, maybe not.
A couple of days ago, I said, Chris, I'll just make a fender on stage. And he's like, okay. And today I told him I'd never done it before.
In about the same amount of time, we had a guy named Evan Favaro
build
a whole gas tank. Evan is freakishly talented.
Well, I can turn this into a gas tank.
Yeah, go see if that thing works now, because that's getting on my nerves. Evan is a young guy. He just got engaged on our stage in New York City, and he's on Orange County Choppers as their lead fabricator, plus he's got his own shop, Speakeasy Motors.
Oh, that's getting it. That's getting it. Maybe. God, we got to get now on over. You're going to have to get
I know. Yeah, Mark just said if this works, Kyle's not going to have any excuses left. Oh, well, this piece of metal isn't designed for this particular brand of stretcher.
It's too tight.
Can't get the jaws open. Can you unadjust it? Do you want him to hammer some?
Give that to me. Try it, but this is going to be a long process if you got to open it for me every time.
Yeah, his wife Deidre usually does this if it requires hammer work.
It needs to be a little.
Only because she's an extremely angry woman. Deidre, if you're watching,
just pull that.
You're angry. The last time I saw her, she was angry, and the time before that, she was angry. The time before that, she was angry. She's got a lot of Latin blood in her, though. That's her excuse anyway. That's what she says. She gets angry.
Well, there's just not going to be enough. Chris, get a piece of tubing over there, and
Chris, what are you can sneak in. I just don't like it when they sneak out. You guys want to sit down?
Yeah, it's held down.
I just invited you to sit down, and you just said no, man. At least you were honest.
Well.
Oh, you just got here? All right. Well, go wear your legs out and come back.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm old. By the time I'd have gotten from the entrance to here, I'd have needed a seat.
Oh, actually, yeah, there we go.
Chris and I were talking about that this morning. We got an Airbnb here in town, and we were putting our shoes on. We were looking for some place we could sit.
That's good. Yeah, get that.
Trying to put shoes on, man. Fat. You don't understand, Nate. I'm fat, man. I was trying to do that. I'm fat enough now. My back hurts. How are you doing? I don't blame you. I'm a little. Oh, coverage is going away.
So we're always happy to endorse our sponsors for the tools and stuff in Grease and Gears Garage.
Except for this one.
On this particular occasion, Mike Mittler, if you're watching out there, we'd like to. We need some help with the Strinker stretcher.
This has been a problem since Sturgis.
And
we've had some of the world's best metal shapers. Aaron Green, Evan.
I thought Aaron Green and Sturgis. I thought he was literally going to pick up our Shrinker stretcher and whip it off a stage.
Yeah, Aaron kept covering his mic and leaning over to me and saying really nasty things. I was like, Dude, I'm really sorry. But it was, John, this thing is not this Shrinker Stretch. Miller Brothers is a good brand. This Shrinker Stretcher's just giving us hell now all year, though. So.
And it could totally be the way we have it together or something. I don't know.
Yeah, but we also have had some pretty smart people assemble and disassemble and assemble and disassemble that thing. So, Chris, grab that microphone again. Put your coffee down. While he's doing that, while he's shrinking that, tell me about, I told him a little bit about how War Pony comes together. Tell us why you're going to call it War Pony.
Okay, so back when the magazine was still local, because Cycle Source started out as just a free local thing, we got up to the national newsstands about 12 years ago. And when we first got to the national newsstands, I couldn't afford to go to all the places in the country that I needed to go. Like the other big magazines would fly in, they would take pictures, do their stories, and they'd fly out. And I rode this motorcycle. Well, that's definitely broke now. So I rode this motorcycle to every event to get my stories out, to take magazines around and build the magazine up. By the time my buddy totaled this bike, it had over 240,000 miles on it. So it's been, we call it the bike that built the magazine. So when my buddy totaled it, we put it in the corner. We bought it back from the insurance company, put it in the corner, and we were wondering what we were going to do with it. And then Paco came out with this frame. And since we already had the big S&S motor in it, the Baker transmission, this was an opportunity for us to dress that motor up, bring it back out, and it's, it could be like a tribute to the beginning of the magazine for us. So the name War Pony comes from the fact that in addition to everything that I did building the magazine, I raced this bike in the first ever Hokahay race. For anybody who doesn't know what that is, we started in Key West, Florida. You got directions every 1,000 miles. So every 1,000 miles there was a new checkpoint. You got a new sheet of directions. It ended up being a 9,500-mile race back and forth across the United States, up through the provinces of Canada and into Alaska, and that's where the final stop.
But the directions weren't like you just printed it off a MapQuest.
No. No, it was like you would get your next direction would be turn right on Country Road 35. Not in this state, not in 127 miles. So you might sit there for 800 miles going Country Road 35, Country Road 35, and looking for that road. It could be 5 miles down the road, but some days I rode all day looking for that. And then you're getting a map out, and it was just like, it was crazy. No sleep. Especially once you got up onto the Alaskan highway, the sun stopped going down. So you couldn't tell what time of day it was. And this was a race, so we weren't sleeping very much to begin with. And the rules were you had to sleep beside the bike. No hotel rooms.
So, Chris, you pulled over in Alaska to take a nap, and what happened?
Well, and dude, literally I woke up one time surprised that I was riding a motorcycle, and I realized that, I had to sleep or I was going to die. It was days that I was awake. I was hallucinating and everything, and I said, okay, I'm going to pull over up here. I'm going to, right beside the road. I'll just crash out for a little bit. As my bike is drifting to the stop, I swear to you, God, I look down on the road, and there's a collie dog-sized porcupine that something had just bit the head clean off of. And I was like, into gear and back on the road. I was like, I got another 40 miles in me at least, because there's no way I'm sleeping here.
And Chris, I tell you, Chris and I, my first Sturgis ride was when I was 16 years old. We're long-distance riders. We put miles on bikes. I got a Road King that I had for 5 years, put 158,000 miles on it. Chris put 250,000. We ride. But so Chris is a rider. The guy that won the Hokahay was 2 days ahead of Chris.
2 days ahead of me. I did that 9,500 miles in, I think it was 11 days I did. And the guy that won did it in 9 days. And I was like, he's the man. I don't even care. There's no question. I didn't make up an excuse why he was that far ahead of me. He's the man.
But he won $500,000 to win the race. But, man, I tell you what, that race sounds like it would have taken 2 months to recover from. But, when you think about it, 2.5 months for $500,000, good deal. But 2.5 months to come in seventh.
This was the real value of it. By the second day of that, by my second sheet of instructions, I didn't even really care about the money anymore. Once you get out on the road like that and long distance travel completely by myself, I started to realize a whole bunch of stuff, because there's a metamorphosis that happens when you do long distance travel. You know, you get 100 miles from your house, you're still thinking about yesterday and last week and what your boss said. You get 400 or 500 miles from your house, you start thinking about last month, last year. You get 4,000 or 5,000 miles from your house, you don't think about any of that anymore. You get such a pure clarity that goes on in your mind, and you reach a place, man, where you really just start to think about life. So I prescribe this. Anyone who has the ability to climb on a motorcycle and just disappear for a month, it will be the single most best thing you've ever done in your life. It changed me completely.
There's freedom in riding like that for me, and to echo that same sentiment, we've never really talked about that, is that I stop thinking about other people and start reflecting more on myself. And then eventually I start doing a personal inventory and start reflecting about, man, when I get back, how am I going to be with other people, rather than thinking about how other people are with me. It's a beautiful thing, really, riding, and it happens to everybody.
And like I said, there's a step beyond that where you're done thinking of that stuff even.
Oh, yeah.
And you just get to the point where you go, wow, look how blue the sky is over there. What is that? That's the smell of Timothy Hay coming through my nose. You know, like you just get to appreciating life and appreciating where you're at in the moment.
Yeah.
It's great.
Let's go for a ride. Now I want to ride, but not up
But
here
it's
today.
7 degrees outside. I'm not riding today.
Oh, you never answered the question. Anyway, I'll answer the question. Reason it's called War Pony is because during that Hoka Challenge, which raised money for the Lakota Nation, because they were having a difficult time getting clean drinking water on their reservations, they were raising money for that, and Chris just kind of decorated his bike in a theme with Lakota images, and it was
actually the exact paint job that Crazy Horse himself put on his War Pony. So I thought, like, you know, if we were doing all this, and like it was the same kind of rite of passage for all of us in that race to like really challenging ourselves. And even the name Hoka of that race, Hoka means it's a good day to die, you know, which by the end of that race I started to understand the name of it was so perfect, because what that actually means is, you know, I've done everything that I need to do here, you know. So if this ends up being the day that I do pass away, I've done everything I'm supposed to do. So
that bike, the soul of a motorcycle, is really that drivetrain that he had 250 some odd thousand miles on. We're transplanting that soul into this new frame, this new chassis, and so this is actually going to be War Pony. It's that soul continues to live on in that, because Chris and I are kind of these weird, spiritual, kind of weirdo hippies. Dude.
I always say the product of a hippie and a biker. That was my mom and my dad. So I got a little bit of each of their genes, and I put a lot of stock in a thing that I call the metaphysics of motorcycling. You know, and I write about this again and again in my editorial, because there's part of this, like, you know, the cheesy slogans. If I have to explain it, you don't understand, but it's true. There's part of this you can't buy off the shelf in a store. You know, people can't package it. They can't really. I mean, even in the best literature, the best videos that you watch, it'll touch that place inside of you. But there's something that happens out there. It really does happen on a metaphysical level. And the motorcycle culture and the motorcycle sport is the only place I've really found that.
Now I kind of wish I'd have let you go earlier. Kyle, what are we doing here? What are you guys up to?
Well,
what is this machine called that doesn't make noise?
This English wheel is not my forte, actually. He did a lot. He said he made that. You should go check that bike out, because he said he did most of that bike with a hammer, a mallet, and an English wheel. And he's stretching it. But
what an English wheel is going to do is you've got two surfaces, and again, there's multiple dies. You can make your own dies if you're into that. If for some reason those dies don't work, I've never made anything that I couldn't find a die that worked for. Gimli is now getting him another die, and they're going to change that out. And but what that does is it brings pressure between the two, and that's actually going to stretch that metal out, and it's going to be smoothing it. But hold that up now. You can see kind of where it's come from, or don't, you know, whatever.
It's going on that tire.
Hold that up so they can see it. See how that's taking shape now? It looks more like a fender than a flat piece of metal. So what that does is you're going to roll that back and forth and back and forth. But again, you're trying to make a consistent piece. So you're going to want to do that in a pattern. What you do, you're going to want to do it all the way down that piece and then all the way back. And you will get to a point, I don't know if this is a technique that I've been kind of taught, is you'll actually start doing kind of he is doing it, kind of that cross pattern. See him change that up. And I try to explain to people, it's kind of like when you're painting a room. Some people take the roller and then just go up and down the wall, and when it dries, what do you see? You see all the brush strokes. So you're supposed to actually paint in a Z. I hate painting rooms, but I do know that. If you need a room painted, call a painter. Don't call me. But anyway, so you're going to kind of do that on that metal too, but you're going to want to try to keep that pattern consistent the whole time you're doing that. Oh, my God, Kyle's going to use that machine again. Yeah, no joke. He's leaving now. He's going to get the microphone. I was like, Kyle's don't
Now what I do is on this, I always had English wheels, so the shrinkers, stretchers, and the polishing hammer I never got on with. But what this does is on here, the top one is flat and the bottom ones have arc to it. So if you go one way, it'll stretch it from the top. It stretches it around that arc.
You got to talk into that microphone.
It stretches around that shape of the arc. So if you see us, there's like 5 different ones that we can put in. A flatter one has less of a crown to it. So what it does is if a bigger arc, you can kind of smooth it out with that. If you want a tighter arc, then what you do is put the ones that have more of a radius on there. So I would go back and forth depending upon what I wanted. So when I want the arc to be like this, I go with a sharper or a tighter radius, so then I can run it back and forth and it follows that contour. And then if I want it to smooth out the other way, I'll use a different one. So I use it in both directions to get a bend like that on the fender.
And if you don't know what radius means, Google it, because we can't even help you. You're so far away from metal shape, and I can't even help you. That's right. You might as well. Jackie, while he's doing this, do you want to go ahead and give a shout out to your folks?
Absolutely. Thanks, Pat. Hey, friends. I just wanted to remind you all while you're here enjoying another incredible presentation from our friends at Grease and Gears. The parlor is up and running, and we are hooking you up all day long and tomorrow as well with all sorts of awesome free services going on over here. We've got the Chop Shop dishing out those free barbershop services from our friends at Shed Barbershop in Austin, Texas. Free beard trim, free neckline cleanup going on back there. Our in-house resident mechanic, Daniel, is back there as well, working away on that beautiful Yamaha. If you got any questions about maintaining your bike, feel free to stop by back there and talk to Daniel back there in the Chop Shop. We also are hooking folks up here in this sidecar with free airbrush tattoos. So come on over and get signed up with my lovely progressive girl over here with the iPad to take advantage of those free airbrush tattoos. Last but not least, we're giving away that beautiful custom Beamer in the middle of our display. That beautiful custom BMW is from Disowned Customs. And when you want to get signed up to win that bike with any of my lovely girls here in the booth with the iPads, I'm going to throw in a free t-shirt just for doing so. Last but certainly not least, if you are a progressive policy holder, welcome back. Thanks for being members of our progressive family. 1 out of 3 of you is a member of our progressive family. Show me that policy card or an email from us, and your VIP gift is waiting for you over here in the Coffee Grinder coffee area. So come on over, friends. Don't be shy. We got lots of awesome free stuff going on over here all weekend long. A little bit of love from us to you, courtesy of America's #1 rated motorcycle insurance company. That's us over here at Progressive Motorcycle Insurance.
Thank you, Jackie. What we're doing here now is, while they're going to be doing some metal shape, and that just takes time. So, and you, by the way, again, we talked about you can get this bag and hammer set. You can get them really cheap. You can go to Harbor. I had a hammer, Chris. I nearly threw it. You can get these at Harbor Freight. The leather bags, pretty much you'd have to go to Snap Fab. You can go to a couple other companies, but the leather bags are something that are going to be specific. You're going to have to order. You can do that. I can talk over it. I'm a professional. you, Chris.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, I'm deaf. While these guys are shaping some on that English wheel, I was talking about price. You can get into that, less than $250. You can be shaping metal, making your salad bowls or whatever. You can just make things round. Just start beating on metal, and it's great. It actually is therapeutic. I've now done it enough years because I didn't have fancy machines. The guy that taught me how to do it was old, and we would go outside, walk around the shop with a claw hammer and a piece of metal, and we'd find a log or a tree or a piece of heavy metal, an axle or whatever that was kind of close to the shape we wanted, and so we would beat it out on that. I kind of came to it a little more old school than a lot of guys do because we were poor. But so my wrists and my elbows now, I'm 36 years old. It's taking a toll. No, I'm not. It's taking a toll. You just work. Let me tell my lies, you tell yours. But so what we're doing is, this is kind of an old school chopper trick. That is the front fender off an FL bike, which would be in your touring line for Harley Davidsons. And what we're doing with that is we're cutting the fender mounts off of it. And Chris and Mark are going to go over there, and they're going to mount it backwards this way, and that's going to become their rear fender. And you can see what a nice profile that gives you already right out of the box. So that's kind of an old chopper trick. And so that will go like this. Mount a tail light on it. It'll have a lay-down license plate bracket on it. And that will end up being just massaged into that. Part of the tagline at my shop, Sin Central Garage, is, which my business manager would like you to follow me on Instagram because that's a big deal, because I'm terrible at social media. But it is Sin Central Garage just on Instagram. But our thing is resurrecting hot rods, Harleys, and Hellions. Recycle, repurpose, reuse. We really want to use stuff because that's the fun for me. And Chris always reminds everybody through the magazine that's what choppers were. It was chopping stuff. It was taking something and making it fit. Woo!
So
Kyle, tell us about that fender.
when you got the tools I'm used to using, you can see how it's starting to take shape. Usually a fender takes me a couple hours, or a tank, or to get a nice good curve into something like this. But basically we're going to go back through and hammer it again, and that's going to stretch this, or pull the center of this out, and then we'll go back in and pull the sides back together, and it'll keep curving around until it looks like a fender. How much more time we got? We can keep
I have no
going.
idea. What time's this segment over, Chris? They changed the schedule. I'm completely out of my league now. It's 20 till 1. When are we done? 1.
We're done.
We're done at 12:55, so we have 15 minutes. So get that done in 15 minutes. Hurry up, Kyle. You've got an able-bodied assistant. Beat it. Just beat it. Huh? Somebody should write a song like that. But anyway, you can get into this relatively inexpensively. You can get it for less than $250. You can get into an English wheel, a really inexpensive one if you want to try. A couple $100, you can usually find one. And just start going at it. I've got a dog at the house. He's Diesel. His name's Diesel. It's Diesel, the shop foreman. Yeah, you know, Nate. Follows me on social media. And he's a boxer. And since I got him, he lays right under the machines. And I can start a car with no exhaust, a motorcycle. He'll be sleeping. He'll go right back to sleep. And I take him to the vet. December 5th was his birthday. And I take him to the vet all the time, and I'm like, he says, hearing loss or anything? And they said, no, he seems to be fine. I don't know. I'm going deaf, but my dog is fine. For those of you who just joined us on Facebook Live or kind of catching up with us in the audience, this is Grease and Gears Garage. Basically just some greasy mechanics that Progressive International Motorcycle Show is invited to be with them on the 7-city tour. We're inviting friends to come up, and you guys as our new friends, just to join us in a garage environment. We brought all of our tools, most of our tools, and we've just got different guys that are building different things. Right now we've got, Kyle Shorey from Shade Tree Fabrications is making this fender.
I'm really good at it.
And Greg is,
Delegation.
that's right. So, and it's Greg, right? It was a boy name. It was 4 letters. I had a chance. I had a shot there. Mark and I just met this morning. Mark has a beautiful bike that he metal shaped for the show here. And so he's, I actually called him up to talk about beamatch.com, where you can be a bone marrow transplant helper, a possible match for folks with cancer. And now he's gotten hustled into.
I'm wondering if he's ever made a fender. Probably more than I have. There we go.
You can see that started off as a flat. Hold that up. That started off as a flat piece of metal. So the goal here is to make a fender.
Now it's a bent piece of metal.
Now it's a bent piece of metal. You can do 2 things with metal. You can shrink it and you can stretch it. It's the only 2 things you can do. So through the process of shrinking edges and stretching metal, making it thinner, making it thicker in different areas, and jumping up and down on it, you can do this. Because the tools aren't that expensive, and honestly, while it does take skill, you can make simple shapes. After a while, you'll be able to do. It'll be much easier for you to do that. Did you just flatten that so you can cut it? Is that why you're doing that?
Yeah, because we're using electric shears, and they don't like to go over. But this is kind of a neat thing. I mean, like I said, we figure out stuff on the fly, so we want to get a nice radius here.
That? This way?
So all we did was we followed the straight line off of the fender. We followed the straight line up from here. And we know that from this point to this point is where we want to make our radius. And Mark has this cool trick that he does with a piece of fuel line, that if you get your fuel line, it'll actually help you make that radius. You know, so we get it into position like that and then just take a scribe, mark out. Yeah, you can figure out if you want it deep, low, whatever. We want to kind of match this with this piece back here, so we're going to keep that the same the whole way through there. But that's a nice, neat thing if you don't happen to have like a $750 pair of calipers to.
Which, of course, I don't. Tools are nice to have, and there's a lot of expensive tools that you can buy. But honestly, all the expensive tools I've ever bought have I can't afford to get them fixed, or someone decides to borrow them, and they have a nice tool for a while until somebody borrows it from them. But building motorcycles, man, you go out it, you figure it out, and eventually you'll run into somebody that you'll be like, oh man, that's a good idea, like the little hose trick and making that. I don't do that. I've never seen that done before, so now I'm going to take that back, and that's a much simpler way for me to be able to make radiuses. So I like that. We were fitting a fender. We had somebody one of the other shows ask, how do you know how far to get your distance from your fender and your tire? And we had about 7 builders up here, and we all just kind of looked at each other. And those other guys were a lot better than me. You can ask Kyle. Kyle doesn't even consider me competition in the bike show this weekend. But he's not a good friend. Anyway, I just finally spoke up, and I said, I take an old chain, motorcycle chain, and I lay it on the rear tire, and I fit the fender down, and turns out that's the exact distance you need to mount your fender to allow for tire growth, and that's how far it needs to be. So you take an old piece of chain, lay it down there, and you've got your spacing. So that's why we're doing this. Grease and Gears Garage is just to help out with some tips and tricks so that you can kind of figure that out. We've got a buddy. We're putting that GSXR front end on War Pony. Chris picked up that whole front end, the controls, the handles, the brakes, everything for $600 in Long Beach. Just stumbled across it on Craigslist. We've had to shave down the stem, do a lot of modifications to the trees, that kind of stuff. Well, we showed up in New York and had a guy named George Stinsman from Chaos Cycles on stage with us, and he introduced us to a process that he's doing. He's got triple trees. He'll bolt them on. Any 50-millimeter legs will go on it. So go ahead, Chris. How's it looking, Christopher? As you can see, that's one of our favorite shop tools is body weight. I've actually collected payments off builds that way, too.
What would we do
Exact
without
same
that?
way. Turns out if you put your knee on somebody's temple, I don't suggest doing it unless they owe you money. Unless they owe you money. Nate, you are with the School of Rock, you and your lovely wife. I meant your sister. I was just kidding. It's actually his mom. But nobody ever guesses that. But
Too much more.
you got real excited a couple of years ago and bought a bike, right? Come up and tell me about that. I like having folks stop by the garage. And where's that microphone? The one with the thing you put in your face. It's right here. We're almost done here, but tell us what you bought and what you've done to it.
So I picked up a 2015 Harley Iron 883, brand new, and I put about 250 miles on it, and it started sputtering and stuttering and wouldn't run. So thankfully, it was under warranty, and I took it back, and they're like, oh, it's the map sensor. I was like, all right, cool. They fixed it, gave it back to me, said it was great, and it wasn't the map sensor. So then they replaced the ECM. And it wasn't the ECM. So then they replaced the entire wiring harness and all the electronics on it. Turns out the bug was actually in the wiring harness.
Okay.
But that's kind of what got me into working on bikes, because I was thinking if it wasn't under warranty, then I wouldn't have enough money to send that to a dealership and fix it.
Right.
So that's all got me into bikes. And we've done pipes, handlebars, controls.
Yeah, you've been doing some custom stuff. Now, you've got another bike, don't you, that you're building? What is that?
Yep, that's an 81 Yamaha XJ550.
Okay, and what are you doing with it?
Everything. It's right now, I found it actually in a barn in Wisconsin, and it didn't run, and I got it running over the summer.
That's awesome.
So that's cool. So I'm doing a kind of a cafe thing with that. But I'd like to try to find a lot of random stuff, like old bathroom hardware and, kind of stuff like that to really.
And what got you into bikes?
Oh, geez. I grew up around bikes, and all my uncles have bikes. My mom used to work for a company that hosted motorcycle conventions, and so I always grew up around bikes. And I got into the Harley thing because I'd come to conventions and see people like you all like tatted up and rock and roll. And be like, that's who I want to be.
Wow.
And you can actually make a living doing it. So.
Yeah, you can. So you can kind of marry well. That's all I got to say.
Somewhat.
Yeah, man, I tell you. Yeah, you can. You can make a living in it, but it's hard. I know a lot of guys. My advice to people is if you want to make $1 million in the motorcycle industry, start with $5 million, and you'll whittle it down pretty quick. But it's tough to do. But I've been super excited about Nate doing that. Nate and I met actually on this stage 5 years ago, was it?
4 or 5, yeah.
It must have been 6 years ago now, because I took last year off. I used to be the spokesperson for Progressive Motorcycle Insurance and left that work a little over a year ago. So, yeah, it's been 6 years. And he was just a fresh-faced kid then. He looks
all bushy-tailed and bright-eyed.
He was bushy-tailed and bright-eyed. Now he just looks like a hobo. But but you got into motorcycles, and it was cool because you would hit me up with questions. And I kind of miss that. Now he knows so much, he figures he surpassed my knowledge level, so he doesn't have to ask me questions anymore.
Well, I hit you up for some welding work like a year ago, and I didn't hear back, so I just went to welding college.
Did you hit me up for welding work?
I hit you up for welding work.
That's why none of us make money in the motorcycle industry, because we stand around, oh, you wanted me to do that? Oh, I didn't know that. So, no.
Well, you were so busy working on Skinny Mini that's sitting over there right now. That bike looks fantastic.
Thanks, man. That is labor love. Royal Enfield North America gave me the opportunity to build a bike. So they sent me a brand new Royal Enfield Continental GT 535, and beautiful bike. And I had begged them, just send me a motor. All the other guys that they sent the bikes to made cafe racers or flat trackers out of them. I'm like, well, it's already either a cafe racer or a flat tracker. Why would I mean, it's not a challenge. So over there by the J&P Cycles display, I've got Skinny Mini, and it's a 10.5-foot long 70 style chopper. It's 6 inches wide at its widest point. So I built a Skinny Mini out of it.
That is one cylinder. How fast you said you get that up to?
I've re-geared it now. Those things are really around town kind of commuter bikes, being one-lungers. So when I got it, it was good on the interstate for 60, 65 miles an hour. Put a bigger front sprocket on it. I'm getting 75, 80 miles an hour. I can ride it on the interstate. Of course, it's a girder front end, spool wheel up front. It's only got a rear brake. And so anything over 75, 80 miles an hour on that bike, it's a death wish kind of. I mean, you're not going to stop quick. You're not going to get out anything's way real quick. It's not a sport bike, but a lot of fun to build, so I appreciate it. That was a lot of fun. But, man, I built that bike in 5 weeks, Nate.
Yeah. Yeah, I followed it because you were posting updates on Instagram and Facebook on Sin Central.
I know. I was trying to spread out my pictures so it looked like I took all the 3 months. But I was like, I had 5 weeks in my schedule, so I'm like, I'm building this bike. And I'm a one-man show down there, so I was like, I'm building this bike in 5 weeks, come hell or high water, because stuff had to be to chrome and paint and stuff. So I was like, all right, we're going to go at it. But I got beat by a dirt bike in that biker build-off.
You lost that?
I lost to Ron Harris, a guy from Florida, built one from Chop Docks. And he took one and basically built a little dirt bike out of it. And then they took me to his hometown rally in North Carolina, and it was a People's Choice Award, so everybody voted for him. But I lost. I think it's funny. I lost to a dirt bike. And I took my oldest son, who helped me with the build. Man, he took it pretty hard. He was like, now I know why you never put bikes in shows. I was like, wow, it's all right. So, but I'm still a little bitter about it, a little salty.
I'll vote for it today.
All right, go vote for it. I don't even know what my number is for People's Choice. 150, I think it's hanging on there. Hey, vote for it. That'd be good. If I won People's Choice here, I'd feel like a winner again. So, well, folks, we've got about 2 minutes left. Kyle, bring me that fender. You're done.
Yeah, we're done.
We only got 2 minutes left. It's a fender segment, as it turned out. Look at that. Can you guys see that? They can't see it from that side. Check that fender out. So that's the front fender off an FL bike, FL Harley. We've just taken the mounts off of it. That's all the modification that happened, and it drops down. It's going to give us a really nice, clean rear fender now. Just turn it around. So that's a nice chopper trick. Kyle, tell me what you've got here. Show me where you're at.
So what we meant is we were going to make a front fender for a dirt bike is what our plan was.
With a 26-inch wheel.
With a great big wheel. Actually, mostly we showed the process. We had some technical difficulties. We're still getting this show together. It's our first year. We're going to get some better tools set up here. But, you get the process. You're stretching and shrinking. You're pulling the sides together to try to get this compound curve. Metal shaping is always a really long process. And there is a reason why a lot of metal shapers have really big arms, because you can see how much work it takes just to get that type of a curve.
And this is a thinner gauge of metal than what we normally would use.
Yeah. Well, no, this is about normal, but a lot of guys that are doing demonstrations like this use aluminum, and it's a lot easier to shape. But nobody really in the real world that I know uses aluminum unless for motorcycle stuff, because it's really hard to keep solid and keep from cracking. So I always do everything out of steel. I just actually finished. I got a sidecar. I just finished a sidecar, and it's probably the most work I've ever done in a 2-week period in my whole life. And I used to be in the construction business, so it's this metal shaping process. I just go in at the end of the day, and I just feel like I can't even stand up, because you're using this and that and all day long, and it's a hard process. But really, when you make something completely out of steel and turn metal into this crazy shape, it's a really amazing
to do this fender. By the time this fender would be finished, we'd end up with probably about 20 hours in the fender.
Well, with this type of tooling, yes. There's guys. There's a guy named a company called Cooper Smithing, and he makes 20 of these fenders a day out of this steel.
He's got industrial equipment,
but he's got a proper hammer and anvils and everything that you can do it with, and he can take a flat piece of steel and just run it through there and just bend it into a perfect fender in like an hour. But with this smaller type of equipment, which if you're in your garage doing or trying and you want to get into this type of stuff, this little equipment works. It just takes a little more time.
If you want something truly custom, you can make it, ladies and gentlemen. Kyle, thank you so much. Mark, thank you so much. Nate,
thanks
thank
for
you
your
so
help,
much.
buddy.
Good to see
This
you again.
guy. Hey, give him a hand.
Give Mark a big
Give
hand.
Mark a big hand.
These guys, thank you. And another Mark, Chris, thank you so much. And we're going to be back with Grease and Gears Garage.
We're gonna have
Jackie's going to tell you about other stuff that's going on. Always good to have you join us. Check out the screens there for when we'll be back. I think I'm doing some builder interviews. We're going to have some of the retro builders come over. I'm going to talk to 2 or 3 of them at 1 o'clock or 1:30 or I don't know. They changed the schedule on me. And then we got Brian Clock from Clockworks in South Dakota and Corey Ness from the Ness Dynasty from California are going to be on stage around 2:30 coming up here doing some stuff for us. So we'll see you later. Thank you very much.
Well, put your hands together, folks, one more time for the boys from Grease and Gears.